Let's talk about this little guy. More specifically, let's talk about the front part or the frontal lobe. And I like to think about this as our brain's manager. It's basically sitting up here saying things like, okay, everybody calm down. Let's make a plan. Let's stop. Let's think about it. Maybe don't say that. And for the love of everybody, please do not make that decision. But when dementia affects the frontal lobe, that manager can actually start having some performance issues. So what exactly does the frontal lobe do? Well, from the looks of it, a lot. It does things like planning, organizing, problem solving, decision making, judgment, impulse control, attention, initiating tasks, and regulating behaviors and emotions, as well as language and movement. So when this area of the brain isn't functioning properly, you can imagine that it's more than just, I cannot remember the person's name. No, we're talking about judgment and impulse. Let's start with one thing that caregivers most definitely notice pretty quickly, and that is judgment, because your frontal lobe is actually your filter. So it helps you think things like, should I do that? Is that appropriate? What would happen if maybe I should not tell my entire family that at Thanksgiving? Because this is your filter. And whenever this actually is damaged, that filter can become weaker. And then you're going to see your loved ones saying things or doing things that they normally would not do. They may become impulsive. They may make decisions that don't make any sense. They may spend money differently. They may take risks or even say things that they should not say. They may have difficulty understanding the consequences to their action. And here is what is incredibly frustrating as a caregiver, because you're thinking things like, they know better than to say that. They know better than to do that. But here's the problem. Whenever this part of the brain is affected, they're not able to make those decisions anymore. They're not able to apply that filter anymore because their brain is not working the same way. Another really big change that a lot of times we see with our frontal lobe is our personality, unfortunately. We might hear a family member say, that is not my mother. That is definitely not my husband. He would never do that. Or that is not the person that I have known my entire life. It can be incredibly heartbreaking because changes that involve our frontal lobe affect our social behaviors, personality, emotions, responses, and our judgment. And someone may look like a completely different person when this part of the brain is affected. Someone who was maybe always reserved may become very inappropriate. Someone who was extremely careful with money may suddenly start making decisions that don't make sense. Someone who was very involved with their family may be really reserved and not want to participate any longer. And the last one I think is very important. It's the difference between apathy and laziness, because sometimes with the frontal lobe, if it is damaged, someone might have something we call apathy, and many times it looks a lot like being lazy. So for example, if you're like, hey mom, come on, let's go gardening. You used to love gardening. And she says, I don't care about that anymore. A lot of times the family will look at them and think, they've just become really lazy, when actually it's their brain not being able to initiate that task. And it's not that she doesn't want to do it anymore. She's just not able to initiate it because our initiation comes from our frontal lobe, and this part of her brain may be damaged. Another thing that we might see problems with is planning and sequencing. So let's say that you ask someone to make a sandwich. We know how to open the package and get the bread out, put the meat in, put the cheese in, close the sandwich and eat it, right? Done. But it takes a lot more than that. Okay, so you have to go find the bread. You have to get the bread out. You have to do a twisty tie. You have to open it up. You have to select 2 pieces of bread. You have to then close the bread so it doesn't dry out. You have to put the twisty tie back on. You have to put it back where it was. You have to get the meat out and find it. You have to open it up. You have to get it. You can see here how it takes a lot of steps. And so something that we find extremely simple may be incredibly difficult for them because their planning and their sequencing is gone. And so it may become very frustrating to them just to do something very simple like making a sandwich or brushing our teeth. Just opening the cap of toothpaste and putting it on and brushing our teeth could become a very difficult, frustrating task for them because their frontal lobe may be affected. So what I want you to be cautious of is when somebody who has dementia is starting to refuse to do tasks, do not automatically assume they're just refusing. They are just lazy, because actually their brain may not be able to organize or plan or initiate any longer. Another way that I like to explain the frontal lobe is it's like your braking system. So you may have a thought. Okay, if you're looking at someone, you may think something, maybe not appropriate. And instead of saying it out loud, your brain stops you and says, wait a minute, hold up. Is that appropriate to say right now? No. Okay, don't say it. Or you might have an impulse of, I need to go get something out of the kitchen. And instead of just jumping up and doing it, your brain's like, okay, there's a dog laying down in front of you, so you need to wait just a second and move the dog. But instead, their brain says, go to the kitchen, and they get up and end up tripping and falling. They've got an impulse control problem because our brain is not able to break any longer. It's not able to say, whoa, buddy, wait a minute. We need to stop for just a second and make sure that we're able to do this task safely. And so when the frontal lobe is damaged, the braking ability is impaired. And that's why a person can suddenly, and usually it's gradual over time, but suddenly you're like, wait a minute, why are they behaving this way? Like, this is becoming more and more common, and it's completely out of character for them. And here's a really important thing I want you to remember as a caregiver. If dementia is affecting the brain, then the behavior that you're seeing may be a symptom of the disease, not a deliberate attempt to make your life harder. That does not mean that you want to ignore unsafe behaviors with their impulsivity or saying things inappropriately out in public and making someone angry to where they want to hit them. It means we have to respond differently. So instead of saying, why are they acting like this? We might need to say, what is happening in their brain that's making this difficult? Because honestly, arguing with someone over a behavior that they may no longer be able to reason and control in their brain is not going to magically restore their ability. Giving them consequences for their actions or the things that they're saying is not going to magically restore their ability to control what's going on in their frontal lobe. So we may need to do things like change our environment, reduce their choices, simplify tasks, making them easier, redirecting them, maybe providing structure, or even just simply stop trying to win the argument. Now, here's something really important, because a lot of people ask, what dementias affect the frontal lobe? And actually, there is a type of dementia called frontal temporal lobe dementia. So frontal lobe and our temporal lobes are affected. It's called FTD, and it's one of the big ones that come to mind. However, frontal temporal is not the only type. Frontal temporal does affect primarily those areas, but Alzheimer's disease, it usually starts with memory, but as it progresses, we can start seeing some of our reasoning and planning and impulsivity and things that are typical with the frontal lobe being affected as the Alzheimer's disease spreads across the brain. And that's one of the reasons why we cannot automatically assume that if we're seeing these type of behaviors that it's frontal temporal dementia, it's FTD. That's not necessarily the case. It still could be Alzheimer's disease. It's not typical, though, that we see these types of executive functioning deficits in a person with Alzheimer's disease early on. We typically start seeing them with cognitive or memory impairments first, and then we start seeing more executive functioning difficulties. So let's bring it all back and tie it up as key takeaways. The frontal lobe is going to help you organize, plan, problem solve, make really good decisions, control your impulses, regulate your behaviors, and navigate social situations. When dementia affects these areas, a lot of times it's going to look like they're being difficult, that they're being selfish, that they don't care anymore, or that they could be acting crazy, or that they're lazy. You may feel that they know exactly what they're doing, but I love describing dementia as the invisible disability. If I had a broken arm, you would know it because I would probably have a splint or a wrap on it, right? Or have it in a sling. So you would know, oh, she's got a disability. However, with dementias, especially our frontal, you might have behaviors that you're like, okay, your memory is fine, but you are being ornery. That is not appropriate. Why would you say something like that to someone? You cannot see that the frontal lobe is actually impacted. There is an invisible disability that we have to recognize, that their brain is changing, and that it does not make caregiving easy. I know that. To just know that, okay, it's their brain changing. I know it's still hard. However, being able to understand what's going on will help us then to be able to take steps in order to change the environment, to maybe decrease their social involvement to a smaller group of people who may understand. I'll give you an example. I had a resident at a nursing home once that would yell out in the entire dining room really inappropriate things at lunchtime. And so one of our things that we adapted with the environment, he still needed to go to the dining room. We just turned him where he had a smaller table. So he wasn't facing the entire dining room. He was facing the wall with a couple of his friends. And so it did not give him the ability to just look out and feel like he needed to say inappropriate things to everyone. So you could adapt the environments. So the next time someone with dementia does something and you're like, wait a minute, that makes no sense to me, I want you to remember, my brain is healthy. My brain is functioning properly, so it's not going to make sense to me. But their brain, however, is playing a completely different game. And there is not anything that we're going to be able to do to fix that except for changing our response, changing the environment, and helping them make it through. If you want to know more about different types of techniques based off behavior and a technique that you could do, make sure to comment below and let me know, and I'll do that on our next videos. How can I adapt the environment? How can I respond differently to be able to understand my person with dementia better? Remember, you don't have to do this alone.